A black Belgian Malinois tore the leash clean out of a man's hand. The dog hit the snow at full sprint and didn't look back. The man shouted once. The dog kept running. Snow fell sideways now, wind biting through 3 layers of wool. He cursed and broke into a run. His boots punched through the drifts. He could barely see the dog ahead of him, just a dark shape vanishing into the white. The dog had never broken command before. Not in 8 years. Not in combat. Not in a thunderstorm. Not even once. His name was Cole Brennan, 2 tour overseas, and he knew his K9 didn't run for nothing. Whatever was out there in the dark, the dog had locked onto it. What Cole found in that snow at the edge of the dark tree line nearly stopped his heart cold. Stay with me on this one. That night didn't start like an emergency. Cole Brennan had been doing the same evening walk for 7 years. Out the back door of his cabin, down the gravel path, through the gate, and along the tree line until the fence ended and the open ground began. Then back. 25 minutes if he kept moving. 40 if Ranger found something interesting. He'd bought the cabin after his second tour. 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a generator for the bad nights. 40 miles north of nowhere in particular. The kind of place where you could go 3 days without seeing a vehicle pass on the road. That was the point. After what he'd seen overseas, Cole didn't want to see anything else for a while. Ranger came home with him a year later. Belgian Malinois. Black coat, brown eyes, 83 pounds of muscle and instinct. They'd worked together for 6 years on active duty. 3 deployments. More night raids than Cole could count. When the dog's working life ended, the unit gave Cole the option to take him home. Cole didn't even blink. He signed the paperwork the same afternoon. People who didn't know military dogs didn't understand the bond. They thought it was like having a smart pet. It wasn't. A working K9 is a partner. You don't pet him. You don't baby talk him. You watch him, and he watches you, and the two of you keep each other alive in places where nothing else can be trusted. By the time you come home, you know each other better than most husbands and wives. So when Cole opened the door that night and Ranger went stiff, he noticed. The dog usually trotted out ahead of him on the walk. Tail relaxed. Ears up but easy. Just a working animal stretching his legs. That night was different. Ranger stopped on the porch. Lifted his nose. Held it. Cole watched him for a second. The wind was coming hard out of the north. Snow was already falling. The thermometer on the porch said 7 degrees. Bad weather to be outside, but they'd both been in worse. He clipped the leash on. Ranger's collar was old leather, dark from years of use, with 2 tags hanging from the ring. One had Ranger's name and Cole's number. The other was a small brass disc with a unit insignia on it. Cole had hung it there the day he brought the dog home. He'd never taken it off. They walked. Down the gravel. Through the gate. Along the fence line. Ranger didn't sniff anything. That was the first sign. A working dog out for an evening walk noses everything. Tracks. Scat. The places other dogs marked. He's checking the world. But that night Ranger wasn't checking. He was scanning. Head up. Ears forward. Walking like a man does when he thinks somebody's behind him. Cole knew that walk. He'd seen it 100 times. He let the leash go a little loose. Said nothing. Watched. A quarter mile down the fence, Ranger stopped. Cold hard stop. One paw lifted. Frozen. The wind pushed snow sideways across the field. Cole listened. He couldn't hear anything but the wind. Ranger took 2 slow steps off the path. Toward the trees. Cole followed. The leash went tight. The dog turned his head, looked at him, then looked back at the woods. The look was clear. Cole had seen it during deployments more times than he could count. It said there's something there. He could have called the dog off, could have tugged the leash, said home, turned around and walked back to the cabin. The wind was already cutting through his coat. His face hurt. He had a fire waiting, a meal in the oven. Common sense said go home. But Cole had spent 6 years learning that when this dog said there's something there, there was something there. He unhooked the leash. Ranger looked at him one more time, just to confirm. Then the dog tore out of his hand and into the snow. That's where the real story begins. Not on the porch, not at the fence, but at the moment a man with 2 tour behind him chose to trust an animal over his own comfort, his own warmth, his own sense. Because what Ranger had locked onto out there in the trees wasn't a deer. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't anything that walked on 4 legs through this country looking for food. It was 3 lives. 3 small lives. And they had less than an hour left. Cole moved as fast as he could through the drifts. His boots punched holes a foot deep with every step. The snow stung his face. He couldn't see Ranger anymore. Only the trail of disturbed powder where the dog had run. He followed it. 100 yards. 200. The trees came up on his left. Old-growth pine and fir dense, the kind of woods that swallowed sound. He passed the fence line and kept going. He was off his property now. Didn't matter. He could hear Ranger barking ahead. Short, sharp barks. Not aggressive. Alert. The kind he used on point. Cole pushed through a thicket and came into a small clearing. Ranger was standing at the base of a pine. Stock still. Head down. Looking at something on the ground. Cole walked up next to him. It took him a second to understand what he was looking at. There was a wooden box. Crude. Plywood maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, with a hinged top. 2 cinder blocks sat on top of the lid, holding it shut. Snow had drifted around it, almost burying the bottom half. Cole stared. Then he heard it. A whine. Faint. So thin he almost mistook it for the wind. He dropped to his knees. Shoved the cinder blocks off. The lid was frozen shut. He had to wedge his glove under the edge and heave. The wood cracked open. What he saw inside took the air out of his chest. 3 dogs. All small. All curled into a single shivering pile. The one on top was a brindle terrier mix, ribs showing through her coat, her eyes half closed. Underneath her was a black lab puppy, maybe 4 months old, not moving. And under both of them, almost flattened by the others trying to keep warm, was a tiny brown thing. A beagle, maybe, or beagle mix. So still that for a second Cole thought he was already gone. The smell hit him next. Urine. Fear. The metallic tang of an animal in shock. The terrier on top managed to lift her head. She looked at Cole. Her eyes were milky with cold. There was a thick rope around her neck, knotted twice, the strands embedded in her matted fur where it had grown into her skin. She had been wearing that rope a long time. Cole said one word out loud. No. He didn't have time for anything else. He pulled off his outer jacket, spread it on the snow, lifted the terrier first. She was lighter than she should have been, maybe 12 pounds when she should have been 20. He laid her on the lining. Then the black lab. The puppy whimpered when he picked him up. That was a good sign. Whimpering meant alive. Then the small brown one. He had to feel for a heartbeat. It was there. Slow. Faint. But there. He bundled all 3 in his coat, pressed against his chest. Ranger was already moving. The dog took point without being told. Trotted a few yards ahead, looked back, waited. Cole followed. The walk back was the longest half-mile of his life. He couldn't run. The bundle in his arms was too fragile. Every step had to be careful. The wind hit his back now, pushing him forward, but the cold was inside his shirt, inside the dog's, and he could feel the smallest one's heartbeat through the fabric. Each beat slower than the last. He kept talking to them. Not loud. Just quiet words. Stay with me. Almost there. Almost there. He passed the fence. Came up his own gravel path. The cabin lights were on the porch. He'd left them burning. He shouldered the door open. Crossed to the wood stove. Lowered the bundle in front of it. Then he started to work. He'd done a combat lifesaver course in the Navy. He treated humans, not animals, but a body in shock was a body in shock. You had to warm slowly. Too fast and you killed them. He pulled towels from the bathroom. Wrapped each dog separately. Set them in a row in front of the stove, not too close. He grabbed his sleeping bag from the bedroom and laid it over them like a tent so the heat pooled. He rubbed each one's chest. Slow. Steady. The terrier was the first to respond. She made a sound. Half whine, half cough. Her tongue moved. Then the black lab puppy started to shiver. Hard shivering. That was good. Shivering meant the body was trying. The little brown one took the longest. Cole worked on him for 10 minutes straight, rubbing his sides, breathing warm air onto his nose. Just when Cole thought he was gone, the dog opened one eye. Ranger lay down beside them. Pressed his big body against the row of small ones. Added his heat. He didn't move. Cole sat back on his heels. His hands were shaking. He hadn't felt them shake in 12 years. He stood up slowly. Walked to the kitchen. Filled a glass of water. Drank it. Filled it again. Outside, the wind kept howling. Inside, the fire popped. The 3 dogs breathed under the sleeping bag. Ranger's eyes followed Cole as he moved. Cole picked up his phone. He started to dial animal control. Stopped. Decided he'd let the dogs warm up another hour first. They were stable. The number could wait. He sat down in the chair by the stove. Looked at them. All 3 breathing. All 3 alive. He let out a long breath. For the first time since he'd seen that wooden box in the snow, he allowed himself to think the words. We made it. He set the phone on the arm of the chair. Closed his eyes for just a second. The fire crackled. The room was warm. If you're still with me, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button before this gets any darker. Because what comes next, you'll want to be there for. It was the longest second of his life. Because what he didn't know, sitting there in that chair, was that the people who had put those 3 dogs in that box weren't done. Ranger was on his feet before Cole heard anything. The dog stood up from the row of small bodies and walked stiff-legged to the front window. His hackles rose. The growl started low in his chest. The kind of growl Cole had only heard a handful of times. Cole opened his eyes. He didn't ask the dog what was wrong. He stood up, crossed to the window, and looked out. A pair of headlights had pulled up at the end of his gravel drive. Not passing. Stopped. A pickup truck. Old model. The driver had killed the engine but left the lights on. 2 men got out. Both big. Both wearing dark coats. They didn't walk toward the cabin. They walked toward the woods. Cole stood at the window and watched them. They moved with purpose. They knew where they were going. They went straight to the fence line, ducked through the gap by the gatepost, and disappeared into the trees in the direction of the clearing. Cole understood it before he had time to think it through. They were checking on the box. Whoever had left those 3 dogs out there in the snow had come back. To finish the job, maybe. Or just to see. Some men checked their handiwork. Cole turned away from the window. Walked back to the stove. Looked down at the 3 dogs under the sleeping bag. The terrier had her eyes open now. The black lab puppy was sitting up, leaning against Ranger, who had returned to his post next to them. Cole did the math fast. 3 dogs. 1 vehicle. 2 men. Probably more dogs at whatever place they came from. This wasn't a couple bad neighbors. This was an operation. People didn't drive 40 miles into the back country to dump 3 dogs in a plywood box unless they did it regularly. Unless they had a system. He'd seen this kind of thing in the Navy too. Different country, different cargo. Same principle. Whoever could be made to disappear would be. Cole pulled his phone off the chair and dialed 911. The line crackled. The signal out here was bad on the best of nights. In a snowstorm, it was worse. He got 2 rings, then a voice that came through in fragments. Sheriff's office, what's your sigh? 3 dogs found in a box, Cole said. 2 men returned to the site. Cole Brennan, Route 14, mile marker 38. Send someone. The voice tried to ask him a question. The line cut. He looked at the screen. No service. He pressed redial. Failed. He set the phone down. He walked to the gun cabinet by the door. Opened it. Took down the rifle. Checked the chamber. Loaded. He didn't want to use it. He just wanted them to see it. Ranger was already at the door. Cole was reaching for the latch when he saw the headlights swing. The 2 men were back. Faster than he'd expected. They'd reached the box, found it empty, and made the connection. The cabin was the only structure for 2 miles. The lights inside were on. There were footprints in fresh snow, leading from the woods to his porch. They didn't even bother to drive up the gravel. They walked. Cole watched them through the front window. They came up the path slow. 2 big men, maybe 6 foot and 6'2", both heavy. The one in front had a tire iron in his right hand, held casual against his thigh. The one behind him had something in his coat pocket. Cole couldn't see what it was. He didn't need to. The nature of the night had just changed. An hour ago this had been a rescue. Now it was something else. Cole set the rifle against the wall by the door, where he could grab it but the men couldn't see it. He didn't want to start with a gun in his hand. He wanted them to make their choice first. He looked back at the dogs by the fire. The terrier was watching him. So was Ranger. Cole took a breath. Long and slow. The way he'd been trained to breathe before a contact. He opened the door 6 inches. The 2 men were 10 feet from the porch when they saw him. They stopped. For a long second, nobody moved. The wind pushed snow sideways across the porch lights. Cole stood in the doorway with the warmth of his cabin behind him and the cold of the night in front. The 2 men stood in the snow with their breath puffing out in clouds. The one in front spoke first. We're looking for our dogs. Cole didn't answer right away. He let the silence sit. He'd learned the trick years ago. People who were lying always wanted to fill silence. People who were telling the truth could hold it. The man with the tire iron broke first. Some animals got loose from our place down the road. Tracks led up this way. You seen 'em? Cole looked at him. Looked at the tire iron in his hand. Looked at the second man's coat pocket. There's no place down the road, Cole said. Nearest property is 12 miles south. The men shifted. Look, partner, the first man said. His voice changed. Got harder. Just give us our dogs and we'll be on our way. Cole stepped onto the porch, closed the door behind him. He didn't want them seeing past him. You left them in a box, he said. The words were simple, flat. No accusation in his tone, just statement of fact. The first man's grip on the tire iron tightened. His knuckles whitened. That was the tell. That was the moment Cole knew this wasn't going to end with words. The man with the tire iron came first. He moved fast for his size. 2 steps and he was at the bottom of the porch, with the iron raised over his shoulder. The second man circled to Cole's left, hand coming out of his coat pocket. Cole caught the glint of metal. A folding knife blade out. Cole hadn't been in a fight in 9 years. The body remembers. He stepped sideways off the porch as the tire iron came down. It hit the wood where his shoulder had been. The man stumbled forward from the missed swing. Cole grabbed his wrist on the follow-through, twisted, drove his knee up into the man's elbow. Something popped. The tire iron dropped. The man screamed. The second one was already moving with the knife. Ranger came out the door behind Cole like a shot. 83 pounds of muscle hit the second man in the chest at full speed. The dog had his forearm before they hit the ground. Jaws locked just below the elbow on the same arm that held the knife. The man went down hard. The knife flew into the snow. He started screaming louder than the first one. Cole turned to the first man, who was on his knees holding his ruined arm. Cole picked the tire iron up out of the snow. Tossed it 10 feet away. Stay down. The man stayed down. Cole walked to where Ranger had the second one pinned. The dog was holding, not tearing. Trained restraint. Cole said one word. Out. Ranger let go. Backed up a step. Stayed in a low crouch, eyes on the man, ready to go again if Cole said the word. The second man rolled onto his side. His coat sleeve was torn, but the arm under it was mostly bruised, not bleeding bad. He was crying. Big man bigger than Cole, sobbing into the snow. Don't let him bite me again. Please don't let him bite me again. Cole picked up the knife. Folded it. Put it in his own pocket. He stood between the 2 men and the cabin. That was when he heard the sirens. Far off. Coming up the highway. The 911 call had gone through after all, or part of it had. Somewhere in those broken seconds, the dispatcher had pulled enough information to send a cruiser. The first patrol car came up the gravel 3 minutes later. 2 deputies. Then a second car. Then an SUV with the sheriff himself. Cole knew Sheriff Dale Hutchins. They talked once or twice, mostly because Cole's property line ran along county land and there were occasional poaching reports. Hutchins was a serious man, late 50s, who'd worked this county for 26 years. Hutchins took one look at the 2 men on the ground, the tire iron in the snow, the rifle leaning against the door inside the cabin, and the 3 small wrapped bodies by the stove behind it. He looked at Cole. Cole told him in about 40 seconds. The walk. The dog. The box. The drive back from the woods. The tire iron. The knife. The rest the sheriff could see. Hutchins listened without interrupting. When Cole finished, the sheriff turned to his deputies and said, "Cuff them. Both. We'll sort it out at the station." The deputies moved. The first man started shouting that his arm was broken and they couldn't cuff him. Hutchins said, "You can wait at the hospital under guard." Same difference. While the deputies worked, Hutchins came up onto the porch. Looked through the door at the dogs. He took off his hat. "How many?" he asked. 3, Cole said. "Alive. All 3. touch and go on the smallest one for a while. He's breathing now. Hutchins nodded slowly. Mind if I come in? Cole stepped aside. Hutchins walked over to the stove. Knelt down. Looked at the terrier with the rope embedded in her neck. Looked at the puppy. Looked at the small brown one. He didn't touch them. Just looked. He stood up. We've been working a case for 4 months, he said. His voice was quiet. Dog breeding operation about 30 miles east of here. We had suspicions. No proof. They moved dogs in and out, paperwork's all clean. But we kept getting calls from hikers who'd found dead animals out in the back country. Couldn't ever pin it on anyone. They were dumping the ones they couldn't sell. Cole said nothing. Those 2 out there, Hutchins said. I've seen their faces before. They work for the man who runs it. Tonight they handed me my case. You handed me my case. Cole looked at the dogs. How many? 18 last count. We'll get a warrant tonight. Probably hit the property by morning. There'll be more dogs there. Some in worse shape than these. Cole nodded. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel anything that big. He just felt tired. Hutchins looked at Ranger. The dog was still in his low crouch by the door, watching the deputies through the window. That your partner? From the Navy? I figured. Hutchins went back outside to supervise the deputies. The 2 men were loaded into separate cars. The sheriff stayed for another 20 minutes, asked a few more questions, took some photographs, called for animal services to come in the morning to pick up the 3 rescued dogs. But when Cole said the dogs were staying with him until then, Hutchins didn't argue. By midnight, everyone was gone. The cabin was quiet again. Cole locked the door, set the rifle back in the cabinet, made sure the latch caught. He walked to the stove, sat down in the chair, looked at the row of small bodies under the sleeping bag. The terrier was awake. She lifted her head, found his eyes, and held them. For a long time, Cole just looked back. 3 days went by. The smallest one, the brown beagle mix, they almost lost on the 2nd night. His body temperature kept dropping no matter how cold, and the vet warmed him. Cole sat with him for 16 hours straight, hand under the dog's chest, feeling for a heartbeat that kept slowing and then steadying again. By morning, the dog was eating broth out of a syringe. By that afternoon, he was lifting his head. By the 3rd day, he was walking, on shaky legs, across the kitchen floor. The terrier was named Honey, because the rope cut across her neck had to be removed in surgery, and the vet said she'd be a honey of a dog once the scarring healed. Cole didn't argue with the name. The black lab puppy went to a family in town that had been on the rescue list for a year. They cried when they picked him up. Cole cried a little too after they were gone. Just for a minute. The small brown one stayed. Cole didn't make the decision out loud. He just made it. He never called animal services to take that one. He didn't ask anyone if it was a good idea. The dog just slept on the rug by the stove the 1st night. Then on the foot of Cole's bed the 2nd. By the 4th night he was tucked up against Ranger, who let him do it, which was the only permission anyone needed. Cole named him Bishop. He didn't have a reason. The name just fit. The story made the local paper a week later. A reporter from the county weekly drove out and asked Cole if he'd give a quote. Cole said no. The reporter asked if he'd at least confirm what the sheriff had told her. Cole said the sheriff was a good man, and whatever he said was probably right. The reporter wrote it up anyway. Cole didn't read it. Sheriff Hutchins called him on the phone 2 weeks after the night. The breeding operation had been raided that next morning. 21 more dogs recovered. 3 of them in such bad shape they didn't make it. The man who ran the operation, plus the two who'd come up Cole's gravel drive, were all in custody. Charges were federal as well as state, because the dogs had been moved across state lines. The man was looking at a long sentence. Hutchins said it was the cleanest case he'd worked in 15 years, and most of it came down to 2 animals. Cole said it came down to 1. The other one just followed. Hutchins laughed. I'll let you keep that humility. But I'm not buying it. They hung up. A month went by. The snow stayed. February came and went. By early March, the porch had a clear stretch where the sun hit it most of the day, and Cole got into the habit of sitting out there in the late afternoons with a cup of coffee. Ranger lay at his feet. Bishop curled up in the chair next to him. One afternoon Cole was sitting like that, coffee in his hand, the light coming low across the field. He scratched behind Ranger's ear, looked at the dog. He thought about the night. He thought about how close he'd been to telling the dog no, to pulling on the leash and saying home. How the wind had been in his face, and his fingers had been numb, and his mind had been on the fire, and the meal in the oven. How small the difference had been between turning around and going forward. He looked at Bishop. 12 pounds of small brown dog, asleep in the sun, breathing slow and even. 3 lives. 1 small decision. He scratched Ranger's ear again. You knew, he said. Quietly. I didn't, but you knew. The dog opened one eye, held his gaze, closed it again. That was all the answer Cole needed. He thought about his years overseas. The men he'd lost. The ones he'd brought back. The 1,000 small moments where instinct had been the only thing standing between bad and worse. He'd come home thinking he was done with all that. That the work was over. That from now on his job was to sit in a quiet cabin and let the world go by. But that wasn't how it had worked out. Because the truth was, the work hadn't ended when he came home. It had just changed. Some men are made to keep watch. They don't choose it. It chooses them. And when the work changes from war to peace, from country to county, from soldiers to dogs left to die in a wooden box in the snow, the watching doesn't stop. It just finds something new to watch over. Cole drank his coffee. The sun moved a little lower. Bishop snored softly in the chair beside him. Ranger lifted his head once, looked out across the field for a long moment, and then settled back down. There was nothing out there now. Only quiet. Cole let himself sit in it. Somewhere down the road, in a courthouse he'd never visit, his statement was sitting in a file. Somewhere in a hospital that wasn't his concern, 2 men were waiting for sentences. Somewhere in a town he'd never see, 21 rescued dogs were getting better one day at a time. And right here, on a porch in the late winter sun, 3 of them were already home. Cole reached down and put his hand on Ranger's head. Good boy, he said. The dog leaned into him. That was it. That was the whole story.